Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team, no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Jocelyn Freeman, and you'll actually be here with just myself. Erin led last week's episode on the 3 mistakes that men make in marriage. And this week's, we know you all have been very eager. We've received a lot of messages. I can't wait for this next topic, which I love because everyone who listens here, we have the intention of just growing, evolving, becoming better. These episodes aren't about pointing blame or making it seem like we have these terrible traits. We're just about becoming and evolving the best versions of ourselves. And so sometimes that looks like making some course corrections and, making some changes within our patterns. Now, like Erin shared last time, either partner can make these mistakes, both on his episode and the ones he covered for men. Women can certainly make those. And the ones I'm going to cover here today for women can also be made by men. We just happen to notice that this can occur even more with women, just like last week's was with men. And for those of you who are a little bit newer to our content, we have been doing this for almost a decade. So we have thousands and thousands of sessions, documented notes, DMs, emails. Like we have a tremendous amount of data and experience. And not only do we do our sessions with couples, but the ones that we work with ongoingly, we text in between, we do voice memos. So we hear a lot of the day in and day out experiences that couples face. And the third one that I'm going to share today, so you're going to want to hear all the way through. The third mistake was one that Erin was like, no, make sure this one is in there because I hear this from men very often. So before I go into these, I do want to remind you that as you hear them, sometimes you can be like, well, I have a reason that I do this. And it's very easy to feel like there are excuses for the reasons that we act the way that we do. And that may be true. There may be validity to why you do the things that I'm about to share with you. However, we have to still look at our part. And when we go into these dynamics with couples, we often call them chicken or the egg scenarios, right? Like which one comes first? If I do this because they do that, and then they do that because I do this, who changes first? And our whole mentality around these things is that if both partners can see how they are contributing to these dynamics, to these cycles, and each person goes, okay, here's how I'm going to be better and what I'm going to work on. And the other person goes, okay, and here's what I'm going to work on. That's a recipe for a successful partnership. And that's why we say you got to course correct often, both of you recognizing what you can work on to better these patterns. So I just want to remind you of that. There may be reasons, there might be excuses, there might be, I do this because they do this. Okay, but this is about how can you just do your part to interrupt the cycle. Now, I'm so excited to go into these because they're actually going to be the 3 C's. Erin were the R's. I'm going to have the C's. But because I know some of you can get interrupted by kiddos, chores, a work meeting, I do want to make sure that you know by the time you're listening to this, we're probably just a couple days shy of starting the next 30-day couples challenge, which starts on March 1st. For those of you who are new here, it's just an absolute must. The 30-day couples challenge is extremely powerful, but also very practical and reasonable no matter how busy you are. And so you can go and read all the details at mycoupleschallenge.com, but it's an incredible way to fill your love accounts, prioritize your relationship, improve your communication, all the things with the daily prompts that we give you. And you've just got to read the testimonials. Men love it, women love it. So go to mycoupleskchallenge.com so you can join the challenge starting here on the 1st, the start of the month. So with that said, let's get into these 3 C's that represent common mistakes we see women make in marriage. And the first C is criticisms. What we notice is that women can more so resort to expressing things as a frustration, as a complaint, a full-blown criticism. Sometimes it even is like a slight dig. But Again, I notice these things in myself. I am not saying that we are perfect, and I can catch myself resort to trying to get something across, whether it's trying to get the urgency across to Aaron or how important it is or what I'm feeling. I can resort to something that can feel like a little bit of a sharp edge. And so it might be an overt criticism. Like anyone would be like, wow, yeah, that was pretty harsh. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's a slight dig. Sometimes it's that feedback with that little bit of a tone and that side eye that we're giving them. But on the receiving end of this, it feels like judgment. It feels sharp. It feels like, wow, like, do you just have this negative perception of me? And of course, to any partner, that is going to lower our confidence, lower our self esteem. And when we have lower confidence, we know that affects our attitude and our behavior and how we show up. So it's not going to lead to the outcome that we want. Now, again, I know that we can have this reasoning of, well, I only do that because I just reach this boiling point and I get so upset and I need them to understand. Okay, but is it effective? Does it get them to lean in, to listen, to feel safe in the space? Probably not. And so the alternative to expressing things as a frustration, as a complaint, as a criticism is to instead be more proactive in sharing our requests and expectations proactively. So, keyword proactive, right? I said it twice there because that is one of the best ways that we can make sure we don't reach this boiling point. So, I like to think a lot of times about water and like I truly want to express things to Aaron when I'm just lukewarm. I don't want to just hold it in, continue to gain evidence for my frustration, and then bring it up to him at a boiling point. But I also need to be responsible for why do I reach my boiling point so quickly? And so, yes, we may have stressors in our lives. You've heard us talk about different challenging seasons we've been in, circumstances. However, we need to course correct and realize, okay, if I'm reaching my boiling point quickly, what do I need to do in order to take care of my well being, my mental health, my emotional health? And so I want to give that to you as something to really think about. What do I need so that I can be more just calm waters, a little more lukewarm? How can I express things more proactively to set my partner up for success rather than expressing it as the frustration, the complaint, or the criticism? So that is the first mistake that we notice with women. Again, I'm not perfect. I catch myself doing it and I'm like, oh, Jocelyn, you know that isn't most effective. Let's go to the second mistake that women can make, and that is conclusions, right? So first C, criticisms, second, conclusions, to represent that we can jump to conclusions. We can make assumptions in our mind, and this can look like we're kind of noticing the little things and we're picking up these clues, and then we build up this whole story and we assume this is why they did it. And the thing is, they don't think the same. Like our partner being a totally different human being than we are, different personalities, different interests, different background, the way they think, this other person, is different than how we think. But I notice even for myself, again, and of definitely the clients that we talk to, is that we can jump to conclusions about the meaning of their behavior, why, their intention. And is it positive? No. Usually it's more of a negative twist, right? We have a negative perception, a negative interpretation of things. So that even contributes to the first C because we're jumping to conclusions, we're making assumptions, and then we can resort to those criticisms, expressing the frustration at our boiling point. And so does this again lead to our partner feeling like they can, have a person who sees them in a positive light? No. And I caught myself this morning. One of the ways I can jump to conclusions is I will assume I know what Aaron's about to say. And so he'll start talking. And I think it's because I'm also just a very fast mover in a sense. Like I really try to work to slow down on things. But I'll hear him start a sentence and I'll think I know what the ending is going to be. And I jump in and he goes, no, you don't even know what I was going to say, right? And he says it in a light way, not in a harsh, reactive way. And I'm like, oh gosh, you're so right. And so one way I can jump to conclusions is by thinking I know the end of his sentence, or why he's bringing something up, or where I think his mind is going to go with that conversation, like what his decision will be, what his idea is. And that's just not fair. That's not giving them a chance to speak their mind. And so the alternative, right, if this isn't going to be constructive with our partner, is instead to ask more clarifying questions. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume you know where their actions are coming from, because again, they are a totally different human being with different background, different mindset. Their brain works differently, and that's one of the kind of mistakes we can make psychologically, is that we think that we know where someone's behavior is coming from. And it's, again, not a positive place. We're like, oh, well, they did that and they did that, and I totally know it's coming from this place. This is their intention. But that's not necessarily true. And I can just think so many times in sessions where we'll notice that, women are coming from this like negative assumption place, jumping to conclusions. And then the husband will say, well, can I share where I'm really coming from? And this goes back to one of the points Erin brought up about not being so reserved and them opening up. And he'll then elaborate. Well, I was thinking about this, and this is why I was thinking that. And again, just sharing their mindset and the way they were looking at things, and also what they were dealing with, what was overwhelming them, or just how they thought about it. And then the other partner goes, oh, okay, that's not as bad as what I was thinking, right? And so again, it doesn't mean that applies to all scenarios, all situations. These are general points that we're making here. There's a lot of nuances. But the point is that jumping to conclusions, making assumptions, especially in a negative sense, is not going to allow you to have a very open and connecting and understanding conversation. So again, instead of jumping to conclusions, we want to ask more clarifying questions, give them the benefit of the doubt, try to understand where they're coming from, their mindset, their perspective, how they think about it. Give them the space to answer, again, not jumping in like I did to Erin, and I've caught myself lately. So I hope that second C also hits home with you, because it's very easy to jump to conclusions. So just as a recap, there's resorting to criticisms, jumping to conclusions, and then the third one that Erin was very adamant. He was like, this definitely has to be included, again, because he hears it so often when talking to men individually. And that is consistency, but not in the way you might think. Really, it would be inconsistency. And what he notices, and I definitely notice it too, but he hears it for sure on the receiving end from men, is that women say they need to be validated. Validate my feelings, which is for sure something a lot of people are working on. That was also discussed in the husband's episode. Validate my feelings. I need to be able to share with you my emotion. However, are we doing the same for them? Are we validating whether it's their feelings or the way that they see things, the way they come to decisions? And he says, a lot of men will say, I don't feel that I get in return what they are asking for, which is that validation. And when I think about these interactions, these sessions, I do notice that. I do see where it can be, again, like validate my feelings. I need you to feel like you understand me more. Okay, yes, but that also goes both ways. And some men are more comfortable than others at expressing feelings, tapping into that emotion. For others, it's more about sharing their thoughts, sharing how they see a situation, what's important to them. And that's also important to validate. Just because it's not a feeling and they might not be as in touch with that. Again, that can differ per man, but we want to equally give them what we are asking for, that validation. And this is something in particular, I'll be honest with you, Erin has really asked me to continue to keep my eye on, because I can be resistant to this, you guys. I can feel like when he is sharing a certain thought, a perspective, that I I will just make it about me, And so again, we're not perfect and this isn't all the time, but it's something I do have to keep my eye on. And he'll say that to me, can I get the equal validation that you're asking for? But because we're different, like I don't always understand why his thought process is the way it is or understand why something affected him because I'm totally different. Again, different personality. I'm also not in the male mind. And so I have to realize I can't validate him or not validate him based off of my perspective and mindset because it's different. And so what we want to do is give them what they are also trying to give to us. And again, that's if you're listening to the husband's episode and also trying to work on that. But he said that was really important to include here because he just, again, hears from men so often, like, I don't feel like I'm getting in return what they continue to ask of me. And so they share an idea, they share a perspective, they share something that's important, but it's like the woman's feelings overshadow that, are like almost seen as more important and more valid. And so I think that was a really good point, and I hope that that gives some of you perspective because it certainly does for me. Again, this is something I am actively working on because there's no destination, you guys. There's no like final, like, oh my gosh, I just am this enlightened, perfect human being. No, the journey of growth and evolution and being the best versions of ourselves is something we maintain. We can lose sight, we can forget, and then we have to course correct. And so remember that mentality. Like, that's why it's so key to keep listening to podcast episodes, to stay plugged into our content because there's no destination. There's certainly, hopefully, a place where it feels a bit easier, or you kind of reach your stride. It doesn't feel like the effort is so exhaustive, I guess, to use a more exaggerated work. However, it doesn't mean there's all of a sudden this place where you like sit back, coast, and you're like, I've got it handled and I've got it perfect. So definitely keep your head in the game, stay focused. And I really hope that these 3 C's were good reminders for you and that it's good to hear about some of the male perspective and what they feel. Again, it can be very easy to be like, well, I only do that because they do this, but then you're going to stay stuck. So the hope would be that you're listening to both of these episodes that we covered and that you then each say, okay, here's what I'm going to get better at. Here's what I'm going to be working on. You put things in place to remember that so you don't forget. And then you actually show each other that you're going to be better and better. So we really hope you enjoyed this and allow us to help make those reminders more possible. And that's just the reason we're so big about the 30-day couples challenge because it's the consistency. It's not hearing this episode one day, then you get busy, then you get distracted. But getting the daily prompts for 30 days, it builds the muscle. It keeps your attention on it. And then the topics we cover in there to have you implement and put into action makes such a difference. So we really, really invite you to join this next 30-day couples challenge. It'll be linked in the show notes. You can also go to mycoupleschallenge.com. We know that there are a lot of new listeners here, so we're very glad you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you can listen to past and future episodes where we dive into all kinds of topics. We really want this to be practical, relatable, actionable for your relationship. So with that, we will talk to you guys on the next episode.